It's one of the most beloved books ever written, read by nearly every school child in the English-speaking world. And most people remember it as a warm story about a good man teaching his kids right from wrong. But look closer, and it's a far stranger, sadder book than that. Written by an author who then published almost nothing else for 50 years, hiding a real-life famous friend in its pages, and holding a secret that a later book would completely upend. Stay with me for the next 10 minutes, and you'll get the whole story, the reclusive author who wrote it, and why it still matters more than ever. I'm Sarah, and this is Books and Authors Explained, Today to Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And hold on to this before we begin. There's a mysterious neighbor in this story that the children are terrified of. A man nobody ever sees. By the end, he'll turn out to be the most important person in the book, and the reason for its title. Remember him. We're in Maycomb, Alabama, in the depths of the 1930s Depression. A sleepy southern town where everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows their place. The story is told by a girl called Scout, looking back on the summers of her childhood. She's 6 when it starts. Fierce, funny, quick to throw a punch, and utterly unimpressed with being told how a young lady ought to behave. Scout lives with her older brother Jem and their father, Atticus Finch, a lawyer, a widower, and one of the most famous father figures in all of literature. Atticus is quiet, principled, and old enough to be their grandfather. He doesn't lecture, he lives by example, and he treats his children like people whose questions deserve real answers. For most of the book, he seems less like a man and more like a moral compass in a suit. And in the long, hot summers, Scout and Jem have an obsession. The Radley house, 3 doors down. Inside lives Boo Radley, a grown man kept shut away for years, never seen outside, wrapped in gruesome local legend. The children dare each other to touch his house, act out his rumored crimes, and desperately try to lure him out. Boo is their private ghost story. Keep him in mind. There's a third child in these summers, a small, odd, imaginative boy called Dill, who visits every year and cooks up most of the schemes. And here's a real-life secret hidden in plain sight. Dill is based on a boy Harper Lee actually grew up next door to. A strange, brilliant little kid named Truman. That's Truman Capote, who would grow up to become one of the most famous writers in America. The two were childhood best friends, and each wrote the other into their first novel. Then the real story arrives, and the sunlight goes cold. Atticus is asked to defend a black man named Tom Robinson, accused of raping a white woman, Mayella Ewell. In 1930s Alabama, a black man accused by a white woman is already as good as convicted, no matter the facts. Atticus knows he will almost certainly lose. He takes the case anyway, and because he tells Scout, the one thing you can't do is refuse to try just because you're beaten before you start. The town turns on the whole family. Scout and Jem are taunted and spat at for their father defending a black man. One night, a mob comes to the jail to lynch Tom before the trial can even happen, and it's stopped not by force, but by Scout. She wanders innocently into the crowd, recognizes one man as a school friend's father, and starts chatting to him about his son. Her sheer childish humanity shames the mob into leaving. A little girl disarms a lynching just by seeing the men as people. At the trial, Atticus does something extraordinary. He proves Tom is innocent. He shows the jury that Mayella's injuries were on the right side of her face, meaning her attacker was left-handed, and that Tom's left arm is crippled and useless, while her father is a violent left-hander. He makes it plain that Mayella made advances on Tom, was caught by her father, and cried rape to hide her shame. The evidence is overwhelming. Everyone in that courtroom can see it. And the jury convicts him anyway. That's the gut punch at the heart of the book. Atticus wins the argument and loses the case, because the truth was never going to be enough against the color of Tom's skin. Up in the colored balcony, where Scout and Jem have been watching, the black townspeople rise silently to their feet as Atticus walks out, a mark of respect for the man who tried. And Jem, who believed the good guys win, is left shattered. It ends in violence. Tom, seeing no justice coming, tries to escape prison and is shot dead. And Bob Ewell, Mayella's father, humiliated in court even though he won, swears revenge on Atticus. One dark night, walking home from a school pageant, Scout and Jem are attacked by Yule in the woods. Jem's arm is broken. Scout, trapped inside a bulky costume, can barely see. It looks like the children are going to die. And then a stranger appears out of the dark, fights off the attacker, and carries the injured Jem home. When Scout finally looks up at the pale, timid man who saved their lives, she realizes who he is. It's Boo Radley. The terrifying ghost of their childhood was, all along, a gentle, damaged soul who had been quietly watching over these children, leaving them small gifts, mending their clothes, and who came out of his house exactly once, to save them. Bob Yule is found dead, and the sheriff quietly decides to call it an accident rather than drag the intensely shy Boo into a courtroom and a blaze of attention that would destroy him. Scout understands instantly. Exposing Boo to the world's glare, she says, would be like killing a mockingbird. And that's the title. Earlier, Atticus told the children it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because all it does is sing for you. It never harms anyone. Tom was a mockingbird. So is Boo. The book is about the people a cruel world destroys for no reason at all. So who wrote it? Nell Harper Lee, a lawyer's daughter from Monroeville, Alabama, the very town Maycomb is based on. Atticus was closely modeled on her own father, and then there's the mystery that defines her. To Kill a Mockingbird was her first novel, published in 1960. It won the Pulitzer Prize, sold tens of millions of copies, became a beloved film, and made her one of the most famous authors alive. And after that, for the rest of her life, she essentially stopped. She published no other novel for 55 years. She granted almost no interviews, shunned the spotlight, and guarded her privacy fiercely for decades. Part of the reason may lie with that childhood friend, Truman Capote. When Capote went to Kansas to research his own masterpiece in cold blood, Lee went with him as his researcher and wrote up around 150 pages of notes, work that was crucial to the book. But Capote gave her only a thin acknowledgement. And as her fame outgrew his, their friendship curdled into his bitter jealousy. She later wrote that she'd done the one thing he could never forgive. She wrote a novel that sold. And here's the fact that genuinely rewires the book. In 2015, a year before Lee died, a second novel appeared, Go Set a Watchman. It was actually an early draft she'd written before Mockingbird, set decades later. And in it, an elderly Atticus Finch attends a segregationist meeting and defends keeping black citizens from full equality. The perfect moral hero of a million classrooms, revealed as a product of his time and place. It devastated readers, but some argue it makes the story truer, that a good man can still be shaped by a prejudiced world, and that even Atticus was more complicated than the saint we wanted him to be. So why should you read it now? Because the questions it asks have not gone anywhere. A justice system where the outcome can depend on the color of the defendant's skin. Communities that turn on their own for standing up. The daily moral test of whether you'll speak when it costs you something. Atticus's great line to Scout is the whole book in a sentence. You never really understand a person until you climb inside their skin and walk around in it. That's not a lesson we finished learning, and read it because it's simply a beautiful piece of storytelling. It gives you the whole world through a child's eyes, funny and warm and unbearably sad by turns. And it trusts you to grow up alongside Scout as the innocence burns off. Very few books hold childhood and injustice in the same hand as gently as this one. You'll finish it changed, and you'll understand why it stayed on the shelf for over 60 years. I'm Sarah, and this is Books and Authors Explained. The affiliate link to the book is in the description.